I'm so forward to this. Andy, we are live. Take it away, buddy.
Today is Wednesday, November 20th, 2024. I'm Andy Hagans. This is Jimmy Atkinson. And at OZ NewsHour, we are covering Donald Trump's decisive victory in the presidential election and what it means going forward for the world of opportunity zones.
We're talking about opportunity zones. We're talking about opportunity zones.
That's right. We're going to be talking a lot about opportunity zones during the course of today's live podcast episode. But first, are you looking to take your opportunity zone strategy to the next level, but you don't know where to go? OZ Insiders offers comprehensive premium content and networking to help you get started. Our monthly group coaching calls and masterclass meetings cover a wide range of topics from fundamentals to advanced, ensuring you have what you need to thrive. As a member of OZ Insiders, you'll get access to our exclusive online community, monthly group coaching, and monthly masterclasses, providing you with valuable opportunity zone networking opportunities and guidance from the very best OZ professionals in the industry. So whether you're a beginner or you're looking to go to the next level, we have what you need. Visit ozinsiders.com to learn more. That's ozinsiders.com. Andy, back to you.
Well, today's lead story, Jimmy, we've been talking about this election for the last 6 months on this show, right? As a show covering news in the world of opportunity zones. The stakes could not have been higher.
I'm looking forward to not covering it very much going forward, but we do have to cover it today. But it'll be kind of nice to put it behind us and actually get to work on OZs, Andy.
Well, you know what? The good news and bad news then, Jimmy. The election's over. But we're going to be getting even, knee deep into politics really for the next year. But first off, I just want to say we're talking about Trump's victory in the presidential election, the Republican Republican-led Congress going forward. Jimmy, I have to say there has also been a vibe shift. And why does that matter? I mean, the vibe shift, I'm talking about NFL athletes doing the Trump dance after scoring a touchdown, MMA champions doing the Trump dance, after a big fight. There's just been this vibe shift. I think maybe because of, it was a popular vote victory, right? It was much more decisive than in 2016. And I think that matters for the Trump administration because there's this feeling, there's this vibe shift that President Trump 2.0 has a mandate, whereas maybe he didn't in 2016. So we're going to talk about what that means for the Congress going forward. But Jimmy, where do we stand today? Because I know there are some races that have not been called yet in Congress.
Yeah, so the presidential race has been called, obviously, in case you've been living under a rock. Trump won, and he's won the popular vote as well. Still some votes to count out in California and some other Western states. For some reason, they're very slow out there, but he's already cleared the popular vote hurdle. He's going to end up with at least 1 million, if not more, votes than Kamala Harris, and he's clearly won the Electoral College as well. By the way, that's not the only important race, though. It's also very important what happened in Congress, and it wasn't clear, even if Trump were to win the White House, that the Republicans would necessarily take control of the Senate or retain control in the House, but they have done just that. There's still one Senate race outstanding in Pennsylvania. We're still waiting for some more vote to come in. It's neck and neck between Dave McCormick and Bob Casey. It is going to go to a recount, so it might be a few more weeks before we learn who won that. But even still, Republicans are going to have at least a 2-seat, if not a 3-seat advantage in the Senate. They'll have 52 or 53 seats, I should say, and also they get J.D. Vance as the tie-breaking vote as well. So with any legislation that goes through, they can afford to lose a couple of votes from some dissenting Republicans on any particular pieces of legislation that they want to pass through. The House is much closer. The AP only called this race for the House last Thursday morning, right before we went live with OZ Pitch Day, actually. So the count that's needed for control of the House of Representatives is 218, and that is exactly what Republicans have at this moment. There's still 4 races outstanding, and they are all very close. If I go to this next tab here, we're within like several basis points of margin here for some of these races. So it looks like the Republicans, if they win these 3 races that they're ahead in currently, they'll finish with 221 to 214 for the Democrats. They might end up, some of these could go either way. I think it's probably pretty likely it's going to be 220 to 215, somewhere in that range, probably. So it's a pretty thin margin to work with. President Trump's majority in the House of Representatives in 2017 was actually much larger. I think it was about 240 something Republicans in the House when he took office in January of 2017. Andy, so that's the state of the congressional races and the presidential race. So yeah, you're right. Trump does have a little bit more of a mandate in terms of he won the popular vote. He outperformed what people expected him to do, what most of the polls expect him to do, but he is going to be working with a pretty slim majority in the House, even if he does have a few seats, majority in the Senate.
Yeah, but Jimmy, I don't want to overstate it, but I think that vibe shift, that that perceived mandate is very important, because you mentioned Trump 1.0, his previous term. There were a lot of Republican representatives in Congress who were not on his same page, and senators. Now, you look at discussions that are occurring now about whether there can be recess appointments and for Trump's cabinet, with the Senate just kind of giving him carte blanche, and they may or may not end up doing that. But the fact that that's even on the table, right, just shows how much this is now Trump's Republican Party.
Yeah, he was definitely an outsider when he came in 2017, and now the Republican Party has been remade in his image, more or less, and that's reflected in a lot of the members of Congress that will be put into this next session of Congress in January. And I think that's right.
Yeah, the JD Vances of the world, right? Who opposed him in 2016. Now JD Vance is going to be the vice president. So,
well, Jimmy, if I can talk more about the vibe shift, we learned of this news while we were at the Novogradac OZ summit last Wednesday morning, is when the summit took place, and it was just hours after it was clear that Trump had won the presidency, that the Republicans had gained control of the Senate, and it was all but certain that the Republicans were going to win control of the House. So here's a photo gallery that Novogradac posted a few days ago. The vibe in the room was much different than I think it would have been had the election gone the other way, or even if Trump had won, but if the Democrats had taken control of, look at this guy here, by the way, if the Democrats had taken control of the Senate or the House, I think we'd be looking at a much different scenario. But it was great to be able to come to that conference the next morning, and this panel in particular, which talked about tax legislation next year, they actually had a pretty good sense of what it could possibly look like in the next session of Congress, given that we actually knew who had won most of the races, and we knew what the balance of power would look like, Andy. So that was kind of cool to be in the same room as a lot of these industry leaders on the morning after the election, when we knew what had taken place.
Yeah, and Jimmy, leading up to the election, the last several episodes of this program, you and I each gave our percentage odds, that Trump would be elected versus Harris, and then as well as the percentage odds that the Opportunity Zones program would be extended before it is due to expire. And with Trump's reelection, as well as Republican-led Senate and Republican-led House of Representatives, the odds of that happening went up significantly, right? So within the Opportunity Zones industry, the likelihood of an extension went way, way up. And not only the likelihood of an extension, but probably next year, right? Because you and I have been talking about the timing when that might happen. Jimmy, do you think that it's now likelier than not that an OZ extension will get passed next year?
I think it's highly likely. And I actually asked one industry insider and Capitol Hill insider, I won't name him by name, but I asked him at the conference, hey, give me a percentage chance that Opportunity Zones get both extended and renewed in some tax legislation bill next year. What are the odds? And he put it at 85 to 90%. So I think that's a pretty good indication. Look, the Republicans absolutely have to pass tax legislation at some point next year. To not do so would be an epic failure. They like, failure is not an option. They have to pass tax legislation. Otherwise, tax rates are going to go up for nearly 2/3 of American households. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act will mostly expire. Next year is basically their one shot to get it right, because you don't know what might happen in a midterm election if the Democrats take back control of the Senate and or the House. Trump will not have that majority to work with potentially in Congress. So next year is really, they have to strike while the iron's hot, and the urgency is very high. It's very likely that the House will want to introduce some tax legislation within the first 100 days of Trump's presidency. Now, by the way, it won't get enacted within the first 100 days. This thing's probably going to play out over the course of the entire next year. I would expect to see tax legislation enacted in the second half of 2025, and most likely toward the very end of next year. When Trump was in office his first time around in 2017, they didn't pass the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act until late December of 2017. So it took them almost one full year after being seated in the White House to get that legislation pushed through, Andy. So I would expect something similar again here, especially given the slimmer majority, despite the mandate that you mentioned. But I think maybe those two things cancel each other out.
Yeah, perhaps they do. And there are some thorny issues within those tax cuts. Not only the Opportunity Zones program, probably the least controversial among the Republican caucus. For instance, the cap on SALT deduction that President Trump mentioned in his campaign, and some of the other things that he mentioned in his campaign. So it's probably going to be messy, but nevertheless, Opportunity Zone industry insiders, a lot of asset managers, sponsors, and folks in the know on Capitol Hill are very optimistic right now that the program will get extended. And that was the subject of a recent news article published by Bloomberg, Jimmy, where, you, among some other experts, were quoted in the article, and there's just a ton of optimism in the industry right now. It's a fun time to be in the industry. It's a fun time to be hosting this program. But tell us about some of the reporting from Bloomberg.
Yeah, it was, and this this article was written by Angélica Serrano-Román, who is a reporter with Bloomberg Tax, and I've spoken with her at each of the last two Novogradac Opportunity Zone summits in Washington, D.C., and we've swapped emails a few times. So she covers the Opportunity Zones industry for Bloomberg Tax, and she was at the conference. When was it now? A couple weeks back. It's been 2 weeks already. It's been 2 weeks since the election. She was at the conference 2 weeks ago. Time flies. It's been a busy last 2 weeks for all of us. I can't believe it's been 2 weeks already, but she was at the conference 2 weeks ago, and she sat in and listened to my panel. And during my panel, I presented our proprietary research on the Opportunity Zones industry and stakeholder sentiment within the industry. And we're going to cover that a little bit later in the podcast today when we talk about our survey. But this article is very enthusiastic and optimistic, or I should say it reflects the enthusiasm and optimism of a lot of Opportunity Zone industry advocates, including myself. Shay Hawkins is also quoted in here, as well as Jason Watkins from Novogradac. Let's just scroll down to my quote right here. This section says, supporters say extension would boost investment. This section is largely based on the data that I presented at the Novogradac conference 2 weeks ago. I mentioned that there's a lot of uncertainty about the tax legislation moving forward. A lot of that uncertainty, by the way, is rooted in the fact that investors are a little bit skittish to invest in a program that they're not really sure if the federal government fully supports it, if it's going to end up being sunsetted at the end of 2026. By the way, despite the fact that if investors invest today, they're still going to get that huge 10-year benefit at the end. Investors are showing some reluctance to invest. And the big data point that I pointed to was the top two reasons that investors expressed uncertainty was the lack of clarity about tax legislation, and that the 2026 deferral date is just too short. The tax legislation would take care of both of those main two issues. And then, Shay Hawkins chimes in with some rah-rah about how great the program is and what else is going to happen as a result of this legislation, in addition to extending the program by a couple of years, Andy. But it's always great to speak with other industry experts at the conference and to speak with Angélica as well, and to help her get this article written for Bloomberg Tax.
Yeah, it was a great article, and I think neatly summarized the optimism at that event. And Jimmy, speaking of the Novogradac event, I mean, a lot of the movers and shakers in our little OZ world were at the event, and it's also a good segue to talk about OZ Insiders, because you hosted a dinner on election night, which is crazy that worked out. It was very well attended, and you took some photos, right? Let's get some of those.
I did. And before we get to the photos, I actually wanted to mention also, Andy, that at the Novogradac Summit, I captured some of the enthusiasm and some of the energy in the room. I shot 2 on-site podcast interviews, one with Ashley Tyson, where we analyzed how Trump will reshape opportunity zones in 2025. And another one with Mike Novogradac himself. The guy's got his name on the company and on the event. So I had to sit down with him for a few minutes as well. And we also analyzed the election. He gave some unique insights into what it would mean for tax legislation heading forward. So you can find these on our website, opportunityzones.com/podcast. But yeah, let's talk about the private dinner that we hosted, OZ Insiders dinner in Washington, D.C. on election night. It was an exciting time to be in our nation's capital with a lot of OZ insiders and some other industry professionals and some people who know what's going on with legislation on Capitol Hill. So we had I think we had like about 20 people there at any given point in time. Some people came and went. I think we probably had 25 people drop by at one point or another. So here's a quick glance at some of the pictures. There's Tess right there. She's has been a subject of the show a couple times. One of our new members, Gabrielle, Brian in the background there. We got Axel Adler. He presented at OZ Pitch Day a few days ago. Let's see, Andy. Here's what you missed. Here's the dinner menu right here, buddy. You missed the carrot ginger soup was phenomenal. I had the grilled beef tenderloin. It was a good 3-course meal with some choices there. Got a lot of compliments, and was really pleased to be able to share this evening with everybody who was able to arrive. And we were very fortunate to have 2 Novogradac partners, John Scheretti and Jason Watkins, on hand as well to offer some comments, and they gave a little preview of the summit that was taking place the next morning around the corner from this event site here, Andy.
Lovely event. Yes. Great picture.
The only thing missing was you. And I had a couple people ask, hey, where's Andy? So we're going to have to try to get you out to the next one, Andy.
Well, you know what? I am at every single masterclass. And I also wanted to plug, we have the recording up of our latest masterclass, which was with Emily Lavery, pretty much putting a bow on all of our coverage of, the election, what a President Trump second term is going to mean for OZ legislation. So if you want to take a deeper dive into that subject, I would highly recommend that masterclass, which is available on demand. And Jimmy, I know we're still going to be talking a little bit about legislation and politics and Capitol Hill in 2025, but also with our OZ Insiders programming, we're kind of getting back to, I don't want to say back to the basics, but back to the nuts and bolts of successful opportunity zone investing with our next few masterclasses. So tell us about those.
Yeah, I'll walk through the next few master classes. We've got coming up next month. We do these the second Monday of every month. So Monday, December 9th, Blake Christian, a CPA from HCVT, will be joining us to discuss a topic that is near and dear to his heart. He came to me with this idea. He said, hey, Jimmy, I want to teach a master class on how to salvage blown QOFs and QOZBs. If you as the QOF manager or the QOZB owner screw something up, I've saved a lot of these. So I think this will be really instructional. Salvaging blown QOFs and QOZBs with Blake Christian. Todd Vitzhum will be joining us for our first masterclass of 2025, and he'll be discussing underwriting real estate deals in 2025. The landscape's changing a little bit. The macroeconomic environment's changing a little bit, Andy, with interest rate cuts from earlier this year, and more expected at the next meeting and possibly into next year as well. So that'll be one topic of discussion during Todd's masterclass next month. And then we've got a few more events coming up throughout 2025. I think we're going to host at least 3, if not 4, and I'm leaning toward 4 dinners next year in 2025. We're looking to get out to, I don't have the dates solidified yet, Andy, but I think we've kind of more or less decided on Southern California, Los Angeles area, most likely for our first dinner of 2025. I know I want to do another one here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I think we'll certainly do one around the Novogradac OZ Summit in fall, most likely in November in Washington, D.C. again. And then that leaves a 4th one TBD, but we're weighing a few options there for that meeting as well, Andy. So more to come from us. And you can learn more at ozinsiders.com. You can always check out our calendar. Just click the calendar link in the top nav on any of our web pages here at OZ Insiders, Andy.
Yeah, and I have to say our dinners, our events that we host at OZ Insiders are very well reviewed. It's good steak, it's good conversation, it's a good group of people. So please, if you're listening or watching this, you're interested in learning more, check out ozinsiders.com. I'm sure we'd love to have you in the group. And Jimmy, you already referenced the survey that you talked about at Novogradac, but I don't want to gloss over that because this was actually big news, right? I mean, of course, we had a presidential election since we published our last episode, so that's the lead. But otherwise, the survey that we produced, this is something that, in my opinion, our industry needed, and I know that you plan to do it annually. Tell us about the survey. How did you conduct the survey? And what were the take home or the sort of the most important learnings that you learned in the data?
Yeah, so there's an article available on opportunityzones.com/news. It's one of our top news stories if you head there now, and it's it's a summary of our big annual report on our Opportunity Zone survey. We are going to run this annually. We've done some in the past. This is the first time we've really formalized it quite like this, though, and we're going to keep it kind of in this format going forward for years to come. We surveyed 251 people. We invited everybody on our email list and our LinkedIn to take the survey. 251 people participated. And some of the takeaways, I'm going to open up the actual report in a minute to show you some of the takeaways, but you can download the full report if you find this article on opportunityzones.com/news. We just ask you to give us your name and email address. But here it is right now. The annual report on Opportunity Zones 2024. I came with 3 key takeaways. Andy came up with 3 key takeaways. Number 1 is that OZ investors are largely satisfied. There's a very small minority of people who have invested in qualified opportunity funds who say that they're dissatisfied with their investments. Pretty good chunk who say they have mixed feelings, but nearly 2/3 marked either satisfied or very satisfied. Number 2 takeaway is that uncertainty is limiting new opportunities on investments. So this goes back to, hey, we need to get this program extended. We need the federal government's full support of this program, and possibly get this program renewed also, maybe another 8 to 10 year run of newly designated opportunity zone census tracts to invest in. That would be very helpful as well. And then number 3 is that once that reform goes through, once extension legislation gets signed into law, 76% of our survey participants said they would be more likely to make an OZ investment in the next 12-month period after such legislation gets enacted. So this is a pretty comprehensive report. It's 17 pages, a lot of material on here that isn't covered in the article or that wasn't referenced in that article from Bloomberg Tax. I went deep on several different topics here. You can see how people are structuring their investments, most popular OZ sectors. I'm just scrolling through the whole report here, Andy. We're almost at the conclusion, but this is the big one here. That 76% number saying they'd be more likely to make an investment if OZs get extended. That was a pretty powerful thing to hear from our participants, Andy.
Absolutely. And not to toot our own horn, But we have tens of thousands of folks in our network, on our email list. We have really the largest footprint or community of folks who are interested in opportunity zones of any entity that I'm aware of. And so I think this is going to be as good as it gets in terms of a data set, with a lot of responses from very, high quality responses from actual investors with skin in the game. And so the fact that we're going to do this annually, I think, is going to help the industry. And kudos to Bloomberg, and Novogradac for giving some coverage to the survey already. So that's awesome. And I'm looking forward to it next year as well, Jimmy. Hopefully next year we'll have a question about, how do you feel about the upcoming renewal of the program, or how do you feel about the extension that was recently passed, or something like that, right?
Yeah, I'm hoping that'll be in there for sure. Next year might be too soon, because we like to run these over the summer and early fall, but for sure, once it does get extended, we will probably send out quite a few survey questions, and definitely for our 26 survey, I'm guessing we'll have a lot of this data in place, Andy. That's right.
And I thought another interesting kind of note on the survey, most investors are satisfied, or a smaller amount have mixed feelings, and then a very, very small amount of investors have any, negative judgment towards, their experiences with opportunity zones. Generally, when we get haters, Jimmy, occasionally, opportunity zone haters, they usually don't have skin in the game. In terms of, they're not investors. They tend to be more random people, usually of a particular political persuasion, who are very angry about Blackstone or real estate investing in general or something, but actually in the industry, amongst those with skin in the game, the investors, the developers, the sponsors who are actually doing these projects, by and large, people are much more satisfied than dissatisfied with.
Yeah, and we asked this question only of the people who said, yes, I have already made at least one investment in an opportunity zone fund. 104 of our participants indicated yes to that question. And of those 104, 102 people answered this question. 18% very satisfied, 46% satisfied, 30% mixed feelings, 6% dissatisfied. So very small minority of people who dissatisfied. Again, nearly 2/3 marking either satisfied or very satisfied for this question. Are you satisfied with your OZ investment so far?
Lovely. Well, Jimmy, today's episode is going to be a shorter episode. We wanted to get this out before the holiday, before Thanksgiving. So we're almost out of time. But before we go, I want to ask you, what is your pick of the month? What are you reading, watching, or listening to in the world of opportunity zones that you would recommend to our audience?
Well, I got two, Andy, because I couldn't pick just one.
All right, so I'll allow it.
Pulling a little audible here. One is my free webinar that I'm hosting tomorrow, Opportunity Zones Extension, What Comes Next? So I've done a few of these, right? I've done a podcast interview with Ashley. I did that podcast interview with Mike Novogradac. I did that that deep dive OZ Insiders webinar with Emily Lavery, that masterclass. And that's really like the masterclass and the most comprehensive version of this that I'll do, because we actually had a Capitol Hill staffer come and join that call and really give us the nitty-gritty behind the scenes. This one that I'm hosting tomorrow is going to be kind of a shortened version of that and more of a preview of OZ Insiders and what you can find inside OZ Insiders. But we will certainly cover what I expect, some of my predictions for what will happen with OZ legislation in 2025, just given all the conversations that I've had with various connections that I have in the industry and some people that I know that are working behind the scenes on Capitol Hill. Andy, are you coming to that one tomorrow, Andy? I hope to see you there.
Absolutely, Jimmy. I don't miss any of your webinars.
Good. So check your email if you're an email subscriber of ours. We've been emailing about this the past 2 days. You can't miss it. We'll email another reminder tomorrow. The second thing, that my other pick of the month, Andy, is this article from fellow OZ Insiders member Blake Christian. We mentioned him a few minutes ago. He's a CPA at HCVT, and he wrote this op-ed about how opportunity zones is a powerful bipartisan economic development tool for both Harris and Trump. So he wrote this a week before the election, and Blake was really enthusiastic about how opportunity zones are pretty likely to, unlike you and me, Andy, he actually thought there was a pretty good chance of OZs getting extended, even if Kamala Harris were to have won the White House. Now, she didn't, right? But he gave some reasons in here why he thinks that Harris is supportive of the program, and also, just in addition to that, why the program should be supported going forward as a powerful community development tool. And he summarized some of the key points in the reform legislation that has been pending for a little while as well, Andy. So thanks to Blake for his continued leadership in the industry and for penning this op-ed a few weeks ago. We would have covered it on our last episode, but I think he published it the day of our last episode, or maybe the day after. So we missed it, but I did want to give him a shout out this month, Andy. So thank you.
Yeah, and Blake, I appreciate your persuasive writing, because we need as many cheerleaders as we can get, especially going into the new year. And thankfully, from the opportunity zone perspective, thankfully, we don't really have to find out would a President Harris, be willing to extend the program. I still think on balance, less likely that she would. But we don't need to test that now. We'll never know. That is a question for an alternate universe, Jimmy. To your sources, estimate 80-85% chance, or maybe higher, that the Opportunity Zones program will get extended under President Trump. My pick of the month, Jimmy, ozpitchday.com. Credit to you. Beautiful. Credit to you, number one, for hosting a great event. There was a ton of enthusiasm going into this, because obviously after the election, vibes were good in terms of, is the program going to get renewed and extended? And we saw that both in terms of our sponsors and more enthusiasm, and maybe even in some of the pitches and panels, and then certainly a lot of enthusiasm among our registration count and amongst our attendees. I want to thank our our diamond sponsors, Urban Catalyst and YourSpace America, and all of our sponsors, because Jimmy, this was a jam-packed agenda, and I truly do think it was one of our best OZ pitch days ever.
It was we had just incredible enthusiasm and interest on both sides, right? Like I was able to get more sponsors signed up earlier than I usually do for a lot of our events. Sometimes I'm kind of scrambling the last day or two beforehand to kind of fill in the agenda. This one, we had the agenda like almost completely booked a couple weeks in advance. A couple pieces fell into place last minute, but for the most part, it was I think it was our biggest OZ pitch day of the year in terms of number of funds that we showcased. There were 12 different sponsors that pitched their different deals or multi-asset funds on the day. Pretty good eclectic mix to a lot of multifamily, but we had some self-storage, we had hotel, we had oil and gas, we had a VC-backed innovation lab, all of them taking advantage of the Opportunity Zone tax incentive, Andy. So I've just scrolled through our showcase of those 12 different deals or funds that were our partners on this event, our sponsors on this event. We have a few more segments that are going to be released as podcast episodes in the upcoming weeks. I've got my OZ's Explained crash course for high net worth investors coming out soon. That's kind of updated for the results of this election and for the 2025 tax year as well. We also have our panel of OZ experts that we do every session. This is always a very popular segment. And then we have yet another panel on the election outcome and how it will impact tax legislation in 2025, because I like getting different perspectives from as many people as possible. So we did the master class with Emily Lavery. We did this panel with Shay Hawkins and Jill Homan and Catherine Lyons. I'm doing a webinar tomorrow, conversations with a lot of different people getting different perspectives, but everybody seems to be kind of honing in on the most probable outcome is an opportunity on extension and renewal, possibly permanence, getting enacted in 2025, Andy.
Awesome. And Jimmy, thanks again for hosting OZ Pitch Day. You always do a great job, and for turning around these video recordings so quickly, which they're always available for free at ozpitchday.com. And that is it for today's show. We will be back in about a month for our special Christmas edition of OZ NewsHour, featuring our OZ holiday gift guide for that special opportunity zone someone in your life. So stay tuned for that. Don't finish your Christmas shopping until you watch our next episode. Thank you for watching and listening. And Jimmy, thank you for joining me today. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Andy. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Gobble, gobble.